Hello, I'm Eric Odell with CA's Continuous Testing Live, and I'm here today with my friend Dave Karow, who's BlazeMeter's developer advocate here at CA Technologies. Now, Dave, we've been taking a look a lot at Gartner's Magic Quadrant for software testing automation, and they also just came out with the Critical Capabilities report on the same topic of software testing automation. Now, we're seeing a lot of shifting happening in these reports. Some of the vendors who were the leaders and some of them that were visionaries have suddenly shifted over to being challengers. What do you attribute this to?
Well, you're really seeing the market coming in the direction that we've really been standing for a long time, which is that testing should be easy to do often, that testing should be done by anybody who needs feedback, and that you can't get to, if you're going to have a continuous flow of software, you have to have continuous testing. You can't create software and then wait for somebody else to test it after the fact. So there's kind of a convergence of changes. Mostly it's about speed to market, and people don't want to wait for a separate test org to sort of test something that's been thrown over a wall. Right?
Okay. Yeah. Now, one of the reports that we mentioned was the Critical Capabilities report.
Right.
Okay, and we saw a shifting kind of in the paradigm of what they're saying are the priorities for testing altogether. Sure. All right. So I'm looking at continuous testing. We see a real shift right here in this diagram, in this table right here. Why has continuous testing suddenly been elevated as a priority? I mean, it's been around for how many years?
Well, the idea has been around for a while, but you think about it, there was continuous integration, and then there was continuous deployment or continuous delivery, right? And continuous testing, people have been talking about for a bit, but really where you got is you have real live customers who are saying, look, if I'm moving software through faster, and I want to be able to push stuff to production faster, I can't just have a lot of tests. I need to have the right tests, and I need to run them at the same time I'm building my code. So subtle little shift. Continuous testing means I can test as soon as I push code, which means the test doesn't get built after. The test gets committed with the code, and it runs every time the code gets touched. So that on the one hand may sound like semantics or a simple thing, but it's a huge difference. People that are used to having cubicles full of people doing testing cannot keep up with a developer saying, I committed my code at 10:05 a.m. Do I have a test that ran at 10:06 or not? Right? So continuous testing is all about having that fast feedback, which is a more humane way to build software. Getting that feedback right after you commit the code makes a huge difference.
Right. You know, over the years that I've followed the Magic Quadrant for software testing automation, and also the Critical Capabilities report, I've seen a lot of complaints over the years that Gartner and Forrester, they didn't really take open source seriously.
Sure,
okay.
Right.
And so they didn't prioritize it, and suddenly open source is in the limelight. We look at the Critical Capabilities report, and open source now is one of the use cases that.
Eric, that's another example of. I'd love to say, oh well, we were really clever in the last year. We pivoted what we were doing to make open source more important. But if you know about BlazeMeter, we actually, from the very beginning, we've been all about. Open source is the foundation. We build on the foundation, and we make it easier to use. So what's happened is that the analysts didn't follow open source because it wasn't a vendor. Right. Okay. And now people want to be able to use open source and use it in powerful ways, and that's what BlazeMeter's been about since the beginning. So we've been able to make open source more of an enterprise solution by adding value, and so this is another case where the market's coming to us, which is that people want to be able to use the tools they're familiar with, use the tools they didn't have to pay for, but they want to get things like, I need consolidated reporting, I need everybody to be able to put their stuff up on an infrastructure that just runs, and I don't want to have to worry about the infrastructure. Sure, I could spin up JMeter on a box, but I've got 20 teams doing 20 pull requests in a day. I don't want to have to worry about all those boxes whether they're alive. I just want to send jobs to something else and have them run, which is what we do, right? So open source has gone from being an alternative to commercial tools to being the preferred execution environment, and tools like ours make it easier to do that in volume, scale up and out.
Right.
That's why the shift.
Right. Now, recently, if you recall, we did a number of surveys with our own customers, but also with people that were developers and DevOps professionals. About 50% of them said that they were leaving legacy testing solutions and going towards open source. Now, you have a lot of opportunities to talk to various different enterprises in various different verticals. Do you hear people talking about leaving legacy and going to open source?
So I was just having lunch yesterday with a huge media company, and they still have the proprietary tools in-house, and they know they're still being used, but they think they're being used for some mysterious internal app.
Yeah.
But any of their newer projects that are web scale, that are web protocol based, they don't even look at that stuff because they want the teams to have the ability to run their tests whenever they want and not have to use a centralized resource.
Right.
And so what's happening is that literally every time they commit a new piece of code, they also have a JMeter, in their case, they have a JMeter test that's in the same repository. Both of those get peeled out. The code gets put up into a temporary instance, and then the JMeter test gets fired up by Jenkins and runs against it. And that's just an automatic machine. They can't do that with proprietary tools, right? So they still have the proprietary tools, but the stuff they're betting their business on that serves tens and hundreds of thousands and millions of users is all on open source.
Okay. So in this environment that we've been talking about, how is BlazeMeter evolving in the continuous testing space just to better suit the needs of the enterprise?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, one of the cool things is that rather than us have to sort of pivot to leverage this open source interest, that's really where we came from. Yeah. But what is interesting is that now we've got financials, insurance companies, health insurance companies that want to get involved, but they've got very strong security requirements, right? And so they've thought to themselves, hey, I'm so security aware, and if you got legal requirements, if it's HIPAA or whatever, I cannot let the data be outside my firewall, and BlazeMeter is a SaaS solution sort of by default, right? So they're thinking, oh, I can't use that. I love all that stuff, but I can't use that. So we came up with an innovation recently we call private cloud, and private cloud takes a thin slice of BlazeMeter and runs it inside your firewall. We still have the innovation that happens every 2 weeks happening outside the firewall, but we store all the sensitive data inside and we sort of segregate it on the way in and out. So the sensitive data gets stored locally, the data that needs to be aggregated in bulk in the cloud goes up. When the data results come back, we rejoin it with a private data and show it to the internal users in full context. So we've evolved to actually give people that on-prem sort of, I want my data in a box kind of concern, but also that, hey, I want a new app every 2 weeks. I want you to be constantly evolving. I want you to make it something that anybody with a browser can use.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest thing. Also, people know us for performance testing, and because we were really the first kind of to commercialize scaling up JMeter to be huge, and also scaling it to be lots of parallel. But functional testing of APIs is really not that different than what we're doing with JMeter. So we had our own customers start to do some of this just using our existing solution.
Okay.
We followed them and created API testing specific functionality. And what you'll see really coming up pretty soon here in April is functionality that makes it really easy to take any API and very quickly build tests, simple tests, more complex tests, chain tests of any level, create them and do it in a GUI or do it in text or toggle. Literally, I'll start it in a GUI, I'll switch to text, or I prefer to sling text. So how do I make it so that anybody who just knows about this API can quickly create a test? They're not a specialist, they're not a testing expert. They actually can just say, this is what it needs to do, and quickly create a test. So we're evolving both in the sort of this private issue, but also how do I take what we've done for creating fast performance tests and make it work for any kind of test? And you'll see that'll evolve. Watch this space. If you've got, GUIs you care about, we'll probably get to you eventually as well.
So Dave, I've spent a little bit of time just kind of analyzing some of the reports that are coming about just to see how the analysts are, positioning testing and how it's evolving, that sort of thing. And one of the striking things to me about this is last year, where was CA Technologies?
I don't think we were on this list.
We were not on this list at all.
Right.
In fact, the critical capabilities is made up of 5 different criteria, and suddenly CA Technologies shows up in 4 out of 5 of them.
Right.
Okay? In 4 out of 5 of them, we had a leadership position, and we were #1 in continuous testing and API testing. Now, that just sounds like a fairy tale dream. Okay,
right,
this is that Cinderella story here, where we went from zero to hero. Why? How could this happen?
So some of that, obviously, I'm in the BlazeMeter group, right? So we were an acquisition. So you bolt in what BlazeMeter was doing, but at the same time, CA was already investing in what you might call the modern software factory stuff. How do I make test data management really easy? How do I make service virtualization very powerful? How do I make orchestration of complex environments straightforward? So it's really a convergence of all that stuff. So when it comes to the continuous testing and the API stuff, a lot of that is because of the ease of creating exactly the test you need when you need it, not after you build the stuff, but when you're building the stuff. But there's also the larger picture of if you're committed to helping people sort of modernize how they build software, there's a bunch of pieces together, and they really managed to kind of find a home here where continuous delivery is like a core competency of what they're building. So we were pretty excited as a startup to actually join a group that already got it. We've obviously filled in some stuff, about the performance testing and the sort of open source support and the democratization stuff we do, but it fits into a bigger picture of people are trying to solve real world problems and ship a lot of software quickly. They need powerful tools, but they also need tools which are fast to adopt and which are, not the prior generation or the generation before that with a fresh skin on it, right? So how do we actually build innovation and give people leverage from the software, not just more stuff to buy?
Right. Okay, so for the DevOps professional, the continuous testing professional who's going to watch this video, and hopefully they're going to go and read this critical capabilities report that we're going to offer to them for free, what would you say to them about some of the features, some of the things that are coming out with BlazeMeter right now that really speak to everything we've talked about? We've talked about continuous testing, API testing, open source. Hey, CA Technologies even placed highly in end-to-end testing. So what would you say to that DevOps professional and what they should be considering when they're looking at BlazeMeter specifically, some of the really cool stuff?
So we've always stood for what we call democratization, which is how do I create an interface? I used to say it this way, which was if you heard about me and you'd had 2 beers in a bar and you went back to your hotel room, could you actually get online, get a new account, create a test in 15 minutes and have results, right? So that's kind of the antithesis of, 6 months makes you a junior and 5 years makes you sort of an aspiring apprentice and 10 years makes you a practitioner. In the old world of like performance testing, for instance, that's kind of how it was. We wanted a situation where you could go from curiosity to results like that, right? So that's always an aspiration. So what our latest release does is take an interface which is already pretty intuitive and make it even more intuitive and make it, in the journalism world, they have something called the inverted pyramid, which is that you write your paragraphs, the most important ones at the top, and as you go down, you literally get to a point where you could just arbitrarily snip off a piece and the story would still work, right? So our interface lets you input the most important stuff at the top and get to more advanced features like network emulation further down. And so somebody, again, first-time user, they've just been given a login, how can they create a meaningful test and get results quickly? You'll see in April, we're rolling out a whole new version that takes what we already had for intuitive and takes it to another level. You'll also see the whole notion of creating tests from scratch, using some very straightforward, I spend 10 minutes understanding what's going on this interface and now I can do lots of clever stuff. That will start first with the functional API testing, and then that morphs over into creating those smaller, focused level performance tests using the same tools, so that once you've got both at your disposal. I need to quickly test an API and make sure it does the right thing and make sure it responds to the right result, make sure it comes back fast enough. But you know what? I want to spin that up to 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 users, and I don't have to learn something new. I just basically say, yeah, let's do that over here. So all of that, springtime. So before summer rolls around, people will have a whole new batch of innovation that lets them do kind of what we've always stood for, which is it should be democratized, it should be easy to access, it should work well for a practitioner, but also for somebody who's been given a login 20 minutes ago, right? So how do I create tens and hundreds and thousands of testers instead of trying to get a few more tests out of my specialists?
All right, and if people want to know where to go to find out how continuous testing can help you rock your app, where would they go?
Well, they could start with BlazeMeter.com. I imagine you probably have a URL you want to send them to as well, but...
Well, they could go to ca.com/continuous-testing, but I think that they ought to check out BlazeMeter.com and see how BlazeMeter will help them rock their apps.
Yeah, the cool thing is literally 5 minutes, 3 minutes. You go to our website, click Get Started Now, give us your name, your email address. That's it. No phone number, no company name, no plans to purchase. Just grab an account, start playing with it. We have nothing to hide. We basically want you to play with it, find value, and rock.
All right. Well, Dave, it's been a great conversation. Thank you very much for coming by today, and thank you for joining us on Continuous Testing Live.